American Involvement in Foreign War. This picture was taken on August 17, 2016 by Mustafa al-Sarraf. The little boy's name is Omar Daknish. The picture was taken during the fall of Aleppo in the Syrian civil war. Bashar al-Assad's regime, supported by Russian forces, took over the democratic, rebel-held eastern section of Aleppo. Because the rebel forces were favored by the United States, there was public outcry for military intervention in Syria, especially as the al-Assad regime committed war crimes against civilians, especially bombing and sieges. However, no help came to the beleaguered people of Aleppo, and the world was forced to watch in horror as the Syrian regime and the resistance fell. I'm Claire with the economic lens, this is Morgan with the historical lens, and Bernie with the social and cultural lens. We have studied the detriments of the United States intervention in regional conflicts. Our research question is, should the United States military intervene in regional conflicts in order to influence the people of underdeveloped nations? And our thesis is, military intervention in Native American colonization, the Vietnam War, and the Iraq War are examples of Americans forcing their ideals of exceptionalism onto underdeveloped nations, resulting in unnecessary harm. For our counterargument, Vanessa Cambanis, a senior fellow at the Century Foundation, argues that it is America's moral obligation to intervene in conflicts where war crimes are being committed, such as the fall of East Aleppo, the Syrian Civil War in the autumn of 2016. From an economic standpoint, Harvard University graduate Tyler Cohen, he's also a frequent New York Times columnist, theorizes that scientific innovation meant to help war effort increases economic value. He offers examples such as the Manhattan Project and Sputnik during the Cold War to show that military technology improves civilian quality of life.
I'm Morgan with the historical lens. The United States has engaged in rebellious conflict since the birth of the nation. The invasion of America in the 1770s was the start of the United States' history of unwanted intervention. The effects of the settlers' self-interest caused a genocide of natives and relocation to continuously shrinking reservations. David E. Stannard, writer of the book American Holocaust, The Conquest of the New World, outlines the violence Native Americans endured for decades during colonization. Stannard spoke at the Vanderbilt University Holocaust Lecture Series about the extreme violence natives faced, like scalping, mutilation, and rape. An example of this violence was the Sand Creek Massacre. It was an ambush on a peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho tribe by American troops on November 29, 1864. On September 4, 1864, a message written by the Cheyenne village with intent of peace was sent to a commander. The massacre still occurred, so the wish for peace fell upon deaf ears. Claudia Sant, a professor, author, and historian of early America, the U.S. South, and Native American studies, developed a map showing all the land stolen from natives and which land was left for them in the form of reservations. The map shows all the land that used to belong to Native Americans. It was depreciated by about 1.5 billion acres. The reservations from 2010 are scattered across the United States and minuscule compared to the original land natives held. This is the original land that natives held, and this is what it is today, or as close to present day as I could find. Charles LeBaer, a senior researcher and award-winning journalist, discussed the history of American Indian boarding schools, and American Indian boarding schools haunt many. As a part of the displacement of indigenous people, they were sent to boarding schools to solve the so-called Indian problem. They were stripped of their culture when forced into the boarding schools in order to kill the Indian, save the man. This disregard for differences caused severe discrimination and disrespect through the decades towards indigenous peoples in America. The United States should cede land back to Native Americans from violated peace treaties. Timothy Snyder, an American author and historian specializing in the history of Central and Eastern Europe, is in favor of ceding territory back to Native Americans. The Discovery Doctrine, put into place 5 centuries prior by Europeans, vilified the robbery of land from natives. Snyder speaks against this by stating that the separation of church and state should not allow this doctrine to still be in effect. Native Americans could have some land back as a compromise to the mistreatment over the centuries. But there are certain developed establishments and housing on some of the land, so the amount the United States could give these tribes is limited. The ceding of territory leads to indigenous peoples having more reservation space for rebuilding culture that may have been stripped away by the boarding schools. Now to Bernie with the social and cultural lens.
American intervention in regional conflict was not worth the permanent emotional scars that veterans received from the Vietnam War, a war that the majority of the public opposed. From a cultural and social standpoint, veterans were negatively affected by the Vietnam War, and many formed post-traumatic stress disorder. John Modell, part of the Department of History at Brown University, and Timothy Haggerty, an adjunct professor in history and director of the Humanities Scholars Program at Carnegie Mellon, wrote that 1 in 5 Vietnam veterans experienced something resembling delayed stress reaction in the year following discharge, and that number continued to grow alarmingly as time passed. The struggles that the veterans faced after the war caused turmoil within their families and hindered their social abilities. Tracy Carner, a nationally known expert in the field of qualitative sociology, stated the veterans had become socially unmanly, an adolescent other. They found themselves stranded somewhere between who they once were and who, after Vietnam, they could never be. In an article by David Armour, a previous supervisor of 6 Deputy Assistant Secretaries of Defense, he discusses a poll taken at a college during the Vietnam War that revealed 66% of professors were opposed to it. Aaron Fountain Jr., a historical PhD candidate at Indiana University, wrote about how, in 1968, a survey of the public found that doves, those who opposed the war, slightly outnumbered hawks, which were those who supported it. Now I'll pass it off to Claire.
Thesis from the economic standpoint is the economic cost of United States interference in regional conflicts is not worth military engagement. Effects on government budgeting and the stock market. A report by the Institute for Economics and Peace, an NGO that collects economic data about war, claims that the real cost of the Iraq War was $5 trillion. The Iraq War was also the first war during which taxes were increased and not decreased, so the entire war was financed on debt. Francis DuPont, a Harvard graduate and world traveler, explains that war negatively affects the stock market. DuPont argues that war lowers stock prices in the face of risk, which keeps people from making investments, which further depreciates stock value. New York University professor Ludwig von Mises describes the shift from peacetime economics to wartime economics. During peace, people will seek their own self-interest by buying goods or services they want or need. During war, people may choose not to buy goods because of patriotism or are prevented from making purchases because of rationing or shortages. This lessens the amount of money being spent, which in turn lessens the value of the economy. This graph from a report by the Institute for Economics and Peace shows the Dow Jones Industrial Average over the course of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is an average of the worth of stocks. As you can see, stock market value decreases during wartime. Counterproductivity in war. One of the goals of the Iraq War was to stabilize the region from which the United States received oil imports, but Nobel Economics Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz argues that the Iraq War increased the price of oil by making exportation more expensive because it was dangerous and therefore more costly to export oil through a war zone. According to Stiglitz, the United States paid an extra $100 billion to import oil during the Iraq War. This claim is corroborated by the Institute for Economics and Peace, which states that oil cost $23 per barrel at the start of the war, but it cost nearly $140 per barrel at the peak of the Iraq War. For our first team solution, we have a way to make war less disruptive to the natives of the country where military engagement is taking place. If the military were to make decisions with these people in mind, it would benefit both sides. Limitations of the solution are that it would be difficult to regulate and it could make military operations more difficult or expensive. Implications of this solution include occupying countries for the minimal time possible after a war is won, and respect for indigenous land, and best possible efforts to conserve native art, literature, and customs by the military. Our second solution is to the economic strain of war would be following the 3 rules of government outlined in Adam Smith's work, The Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith was a philosopher and economist from the 1700s who is often regarded as the father of economics, and he theorized that the main 3 rules of a government were protection from outside sources, justice for offenders inside the society, and public services provided to improve the standards of living. Strict adherence to these principles would cause less interference in foreign conflicts unless they directly concern United States interests. For example, intervention in the Syrian civil war would qualify as neither protection, justice, or public services. Limitation of the solution include American inaction in the face of injustice and crimes against humanity in countries other than the United States. But this solution could economically, socially, and historically benefit the United States and keep us from foreign conflicts as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay, ladies, we're going to start with Morgan. Can you describe how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of your group's discussions?
We had issues with picking our topic in the beginning, and we decided to go with just regional conflicts and the U.S. getting involved in things they maybe shouldn't. Some of our initial ideas included the Palestine and Israel debate. We found lenses that fit our personal interests. I usually like focusing on historical things, so I went with the historical lens for the topic we chose. Claire chose the economic because she usually likes dealing with numbers, and Bernie chose the moral lens because she likes focusing on more of the personal things involved with topics.
Thank you. Claire, could you give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about Morgan's findings?
Yes. So normally we think of regional conflict as something that is outside the United States. For example, both the war I focused on, the Iraq War, and the war Bernie focused on, the Vietnam War, both took place outside of the United States and outside of North America. However, Morgan's lens focused on conflicts with Native Americans that led to violent acts such as genocide. And that influenced my research because it showed that not only has intervention in foreign conflicts been going on for a very long time since the first European settlers arrived in North America, but that it affects our current history inside the United States. It's not a problem where the military goes overseas, they fight a war, they occupy for a little bit of time, and then they come back and it's somebody else's problem. It's something that affects our everyday lives and the everyday lives of oppressed people, Native Americans in our country every single day.
Thanks. Okay, Bernadette, in what way did you improve your ability to work with a group as a result of this project?
The set structure of due dates and making an outline first and doing a bunch of research for several days was very helpful to keep me on track and know which way I wanted to take my research. And the group rules with the equal distribution of work really helped with dealing with like time management and things like that. And this can help me with other classes and other group projects I will have in the future and just social skills in general for work and college.
Thank you.